Hello, my name's Rob. Welcome to Swift Slots. Now hopefully you saw my last video, the Thank You Stuart video, and in that video I show you the 3 cars that Stuart sent me in appreciation for the work that I'd done to his 2 cars to turn them into really nice slot cars. Now I did say in that video that the work was a little bit off balance. I felt that I got quite a good deal out of that. However, there wasn't 3 cars in that box, there was actually 4. Now this was the 4th car, a totally standard Scalextric Escort. Now Stuart actually asked me, would he be able to pop this car in that box and would I be able to turn it into a track monster for him? And I said, absolutely. So he gave me a shopping list of things to do to this car. And that's what we're going to be doing in this video. We're going to be taking this totally standard Escort from Scalextric and turning it into something hopefully quite a bit better than a standard car. So I'm going to get you on my bench and I'm going to show you what I've got here, show you what Stuart wants me to do to it, and then we're going to go to the bench and we're going to turn it into a monster and then run it on Crow Valley and see what sort of time we can get from it. However, I really want to start with the time, but that's going to be hard with this car because it doesn't have a guide. However, I have my own Escort, which I can run round Crow Valley. Now obviously this car isn't this car, but this car is a totally standard Escort just like this one. So we're going to hit Crow Valley right now. We're going to run this round for 7 laps and see what sort of time we get. And we'll work with that as our baseline. So let's get to Crow Valley and run this car around and see what time we can get with a standard Scalextric Escort. So there we are. We now know roughly what a standard Scalextric Ford Escort will do around Crow Valley. A mid-66. Now there is a little bit more performance in this car, I'm sure, but I have to wring its neck quite a lot harder and it's going to be right on the very edge. I might be able to squeeze out a 65, but it's going to take a while and it's going to be a bit tricky. So the problem with this car, or these cars, is they're too tall, they're too narrow, and there's too much weight in the top. Also, if you grip up the tyres too much to get round corners quicker, the first thing it does is roll over. So it's always going to be a balancing act between grip and weight and speed. They're just challenged in all directions. So what we need to do is we need to lose a lot of weight from the top of the car, get a lot of weight down low, and try and get some grip up in the tyres so we're not spending so much time going sideways. If we can stop it going sideways and move all that weight in the top down the bottom, then we could be on to a bit of a winner. So we know what's holding this car back. We now know what we need to do to this car. So let's get on the bench. I'll show you the parts that I've got to do that, and we'll go to the bench then and we'll see if we can make Stuart's car a lot better. Okay, so how are we actually going to make this car faster? Well, like I said, there's too much weight in the top of this car, and that is due to this massive, great big heavy interior, and also this very heavy glass, and the fact that the body has got a little bit of weight in it. Well, we can thin the body down, which we will be doing to relieve a bit of weight there, and thin the roof down a little bit to lose a few grams off this body. So let's just start with the body. How much does that weigh? The body weighs 14.2 grams. So that's what we got to deal with there. Now this interior tray can be gotten rid of in its entirety. and that will lose 11.5 grams just by getting rid of that tray. So we can do that. Also, this glass has got all of its centre section still in, so if we can remove all that, that will lower the glass down again, and that glass is 6.3 grams. Now ideally we could lose all of the glass and change it for Lexan, and that might be something I'll do, but probably not. I don't think we'll need to go that far, and it's a shame to lose a flush fit glass, but if we can't get a good time, then this glass will get ditched, or at least the 3 sides. We might still leave the front in just to keep that sun visor. So that's what we can lose out of that lot there. Most of that weight there can go. So you're looking at 18 grams of top heavy weight. Now what I actually do personally is I actually make vacuum formed interiors, and here are some of the vacuum formed interiors that I've actually made for myself. Now I can't sell these because these are copies of existing interiors, so you know, copyright and all the rest of it could be a problem, but these are just vacuum formed lightweight interiors, and I make them from cast resin other interiors. So I'll buy a vacuum formed interior from an official place, like one of these A310 interiors or whatever. I'll turn them upside down, I'll pour resin in them, and then what I do is I chop them in half. So what I can do then is I've got 3 different front ends that I can choose from, and then I can have 4 different back ends. So I can marry up whatever back end I want from whatever car that I've made the master from, and I can vacuum form all sorts of different sized interiors. Now I have looked at trying to get one of my standard already made interiors into Stuart's car, and for the life of me I can't really get them to fit all that well. I'm not that happy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ditch what I've already made, and I'm going to take a casting from one of my existing interiors of the 2 drivers, and they will be inserted into this interior as a master, and I shall chop away all these side pieces and chop away all the superfluous stuff that's going to get in my way to make a vacuum form, and then I'm going to turn this interior into a master for another vacuum formed resin interior, sort of not dissimilar to something like this. And then I will vacuum out a brand new lightweight Ford Scalextric Escort interior that will go into this particular Escort and dramatically reduce the weight, and also keep a twin driver figure in there. So that's the plans for the interior. Now this particular car, Stuart stuck my sticker in it. This particular car has got a standard Scalextric motor, and I think we probably want a little bit more horses than that. So what I've suggested that he buy, which he did, is this very, very nice Scale Auto motor. Now this is 20,000 RPM. Now as far as I understand it, Scalextric motors are at best 18,000, and this is a 20,000. So this Scale Auto motor should be a nice upgrade for the Scalextric motor. Shouldn't be too hot, it should still be very manageable, but should give you that little bit of extra punch. And I've also got a steel pinion there as well. That's a 9-tooth. So that's a 9-tooth as standard. We got a nice steel 9-tooth to go on there. So that's what we're doing for the motor, warming it up slightly. Now flying in the face of going faster and losing weight, Stuart really wants lights in his car. And I don't particularly object to lights because they don't weigh very much and they're very low down, or relatively low down in the chassis, so that's not really going to hinder me too much. So he's given me a set of lights that's still attached to a motor, so we'll get those light boards off and we'll get them in the car, and we'll get his lights fitted for him as well. Now as you can see, he's already had a little go at modifying this car, taking inspiration from what I've done on these videos, and he's put in 2 very nice bars of plastic card with 2 little M2 adjustable grub screws to get his axle adjusted right. And that's actually quite a nice job. I have no issues with that. So that's going to stay, and that's actually going to help me. But what you'll notice is there's no guide. So I guess you all know what's coming next. You guessed it. A standard Slotting Plus guide is going to go in this car, the same as all of my other builds. And this will give me an opportunity to use my Slotting Plus tool again and get this Slotting Plus guide perfectly fitting into this car. So the next thing I need to do is fit some new wheels to it, because he wants new alloy wheels in it. So what we decided to do is we're going to use these Staffs wheels, and they're 8.5s in the front and 10 mils in the rear. Now these 10 mils in the rear are the actual air style ones. Now personally, I'm not a fan of these for various reasons. Other people are going to tell me that they're the best thing since sliced bread. I'm not so sure in rally racing. When I'm racing at my club and we've used these air tyres, all I ever see is 2 wear points and a great big untouched area in the middle where the tyre sags. So what I do with my air wheels, for rallying at least, is I fill in that middle section there with car body filler, put the wheel in the lathe and then skim off the top to make that centrepiece a completely standard rib, albeit slightly lighter because it's car body filler and not aluminium. So I basically fill in that rib. So that's what we've got for this car. Now these are actually styled wheels because at the time of buying these wheels we couldn't actually get the ones we wanted, the absolutely plain wheels. They are out of stock as usual. So we've got these. They're a little bit more money. They are styled, but we're not going to be using that at all. So we've got 8.5s on the front and then we've got 10mm on the rear. And what we're going to put on this car are this pair of slightly used NSR Super Grip tyres. Now I find these tyres to be very, very grippy. They're really, really good and they'll go well on this car as long as these tyres don't generate too much grip and roll the car over, because she is still quite narrow. But I'm sure they'll be okay once we've taken all the weight out the roof. So you may have seen from my mail call video a couple of videos back that Stuart gave me this car as part of a thank you package, but he wants these wheels. So what we're going to do also is liberate these centers of these wheels and turn these wheels into inserts for these Staffs wheels, because this is a rally car, these are rally wheels. These aren't particularly rally wheels, but they're nice and deep dish, so we can get plenty of new inner wheel detail into this wheel. So we're going to machine off this wheel and put it into the Staffs wheels to give these Staffs wheels a little bit of a different look with these OZ rally wheels. So these are most of the parts we're going to use to fit into this car to hopefully make this car very handy around a rally track. So let's get to the workbench and get cracking. Okay, so having thought about it, this interior is ridiculous for a rally car on many different levels. First of all, we've got a soft back seat, which would never be in a rally car. Second, we got speakers on the rear parcel shelf, which would also never be in a rally car. Plus also these drivers are tantamount to elevating in the cockpit, which is a little bit silly. So we're going to extensively modify this interior so that we can make it into a slightly more feasible rally car interior, and so that we can vacuum form it. And this glass, I think we'll just go full guns on it. We'll just literally turn this straight into a vacuum formed master, and then we'll have a really lightweight glass in the car. I'll replace this sun visor with a piece of white vinyl and maybe a Ford logo or something, of which I have a few. And I'll keep this one as a spare so that Stuart can put it to one side and do something with it. Probably put it in the bin. But there we are. Right, so let's crack on and get these into masters. So next we're going to take out some weight from this body. Now this body isn't particularly heavy, it comes in at 14.2 grams. So it's not too bad, but we can do better. So we're going to take some plastic out the roof, down the sides, on the underside of this bonnet and possibly on the rear panel. And the way I'm going to do it is with my Dremel. And I'm going to do it mainly with this grinding stone. And the reason for that is because in the past I've used these grinding cutters, these auger bit type things, and they're very aggressive. And while they do remove plastic really quickly, what they can also do is find a little spot that they like and then suddenly dig in, and then you come through the body. Ask me how I know, watch my Renault video. So we're going to go very, very gently, and it takes a little while because you've got to go slow. I'm going to go gently with this stone, and we're just going to go around and we're going to tickle the inside of the body with the stone, and every so often just weigh the body and just see how I feel, and I'll stop when I feel it's time to stop. But we don't need to go too mad with this body because we are going to fit the Lexan glass and interior, so we're going to save an absolute stack of weight there. So we're not going to go too greedy on this because, like I say, there's always a chance that you could melt the body or go through it. So let's crack on with the Dremel and get this body a little bit lighter. And there we are. So a little bit of grinding round and round and round very carefully for about half an hour has resulted in a body that now weighs 9.9 grams. So that's 4.3 grams shed from this body, and it does actually feel quite a bit lighter, and I haven't gone through the plastic at any point. Now a little bit of admission, I did use one of those little tiny barbed tools to get right into the corners, very, very localized, just to get some weight out of these rather thick corners, but I didn't come onto the main body with that type of cutter because it is quite dangerous to do that. So the big grinding wheel on all the big surfaces and the little tiny grinding cutter right in all the corners to get as much of that thick plastic out as possible. So there we are, 9.9 grams. That's a good start. Okay, so I'm going to have to fit this rear wing back into this body, and these posts are too long, so I'm actually going to use my heating tool that I made a few videos ago that I now sell on my website, so link below if you're interested. So I'm going to pop that wing back into this body here. Now these posts usually hold the interior, but I don't really want that anymore, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to nip them off just about halfway, and I'm going to turn these little posts into melt posts. So I'm going to heat up my melting tool and we're going to do that. So once it's heated up, hold the wing in place and simply push the melt post tool into the body like that. Done. And there we have the two posts melted in, and the spoiler is nice and strong. There we go. So if you're interested in one of these, they're on my website, link below. Okay, so these are the two masters that I created from the original parts of the Scalextric's car. So this is just basically a resin cast of the glass because the glass itself won't withstand the heating up of vacuum forming I found in the past. It just melts the glass, so you have to make a resin master first that can withstand the heat. So that's the one for the window, and obviously this is the highly modified interior with its spare wheel on the back, some sort of fuel tank. The driver's completely repositioned, so they're a little bit lower in the car, which makes them look a little bit better, and so on and so forth. It's the bottom with all the holes in there so that the air could be sucked out of the mold as it's being vacuum formed. And here is the plastic tray that you get from it, reasonably thick, all nicely defined. It comes out quite well. I'm quite pleased with the way it's actually come out. Even the little louvers across this scuttle panel here have all come out in the vacuum form. And obviously there is the window. So these cause me a little bit of a problem because the plastic that I'm using at the moment isn't necessarily the cleanest when it comes out the vacuum form. It looks okay, I think it'll be all right. For a racing car, it'll be fine. But ideally, I'd like something with a bit more clarity. But it's fine. It does the job. So there's the interior all painted up, and I put some seat belts in there, and I've tried to do a bit of a white fade on the back because I wanted the front a bit dark, but I wanted some sort of metal simulation on the back for the same color as the body. So I've just tried to fade the corners in. I don't like painting vacuum forms. They're a little bit difficult, but this is quite a well-defined one. I would say, I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I think this vacuum form is probably more defined than some of the NSR ones or other aftermarket vacuum forms that I've actually painted in the past. But you know, you can make up your own mind if it's any good or not. And obviously this is the glass actually in the car, completely finished. And all I did was cut a hole in the middle and then put some aluminium foil tape in the bottom of it and pushed it up through the square, which kind of relieves a little bit of weight as well. And it all fits very, very well. And then when you fit the interior into the body, and you line up the scuttle panel with the groove as it was originally, it all fits in there absolutely perfectly, and it looks very, very good. It's quite difficult to show here, but the scuttle panel and the glass, they all line up as they did originally, and you can see the fuel tank through the back of the window. You can see the spare wheel in there, and then they got the drivers as well, all nestled down there in a much lower position than they were in the original car. Hopefully that's coming through quite nicely. So that's all done now. So all I've got to do now is get this interior into this body with a little bit of aluminium foil tape around the sides, and we're good to go, and we can move on to getting the chassis sorted out. Now I'm actually offering this set on my website for sale. So if you're interested in getting a pair of these vacuum forms for your Escort, I'll leave a link below in the website, and then you can buy them if you want to. Actually, just before we move on to the chassis, I ought to show you the actual body taped into place, oughtn't I? So there it is, all taped in with silver foil tape, and that's how it looks when it's completely finished, all in. I've got a little Staff's logo on the windscreen as well, which I forgot to show, just to finish that off, because the original glass had the sun visor on it. But obviously we haven't got the original glass, so we have a replacement. And obviously we all need to know, what is the finished weight of this body? I forgot to say, didn't I? So it started off at about 32 grams all in, more or less. So what did we end up with all the modifications? 13.88 grams. I think we can all agree that is a huge improvement and should go a very, very long way to getting this car to perform the way that we want it to. Right, now we can get on with the chassis. Okay, so it's time to turn our attentions now to the chassis. Now I did say that this was a standard Scalextric chassis, but I was slightly wrong. The front and rear axles in this car are actually from an Inco. Now in terms of performance, I don't think it makes any difference at all, but in terms of physical dimensions, it does make a difference. Now Staff's wheels are designed to go on a 332 axle, and they fit rather well. A 0.004 difference means that there is no way, without a very large hammer and a lot of metal bending, that you're going to get a Staff's wheel at 332 on a 96 thou axle. It's just not going to happen. So what we need to do, and we do want to keep these axles, is we need to open up the holes in these Staff's wheels to 96 thou. Exactly, so there's still a nice tight fit. Now what I intend to do is take the front axle, because we're not encumbered with a gear, and we're going to turn the end of this axle into what they call a D-bit. Now what a D-bit does is, it's a kind of a drill, but not really. We're going to grind off a flat on the end of the axle, which will create a burr. Then we're going to put the wheel in the lathe and put the axle into the tailstock, and we're going to very gently by hand. When you see me on the other videos and I'm doing the chuck by hand, it's because I'm reaming. So you want to do it slowly by hand, and that little burr that we've created on the end of the axle would actually slowly take away material on the wheel, but no more. A standard twist drill will actually over drill by a few thou, or fractions of a thou, but it's enough to make the fit sloppy. Whereas a D-bit won't do that. A D-bit will only take off what it needs to get through the hole, and in fact it makes it a slightly tight fit. So we should end up with a really nice tight fit of these Staff's wheels at 332 onto a standard Ninco axle. Plus also we need to fill in this groove, or I'm going to fill it in on both of these rear wheels with a little bit of car body filler. We'll scratch up the surface, put a bit of car body filler in there, and then once we've got the wheels fitting nicely on the axle, then I'll pop them into the lathe and we can skim off that filler. Then what we need to do is we need to put these wheels into these wheels. Now I don't know what these wheels came from. They're very tall and very thin. They look a bit strange on a Scalextric car, but they could have come from a lower cost car. I don't know. Anyway, we need to get this wheel into this wheel. Now the problem is there is quite a bit of difference in diameter. I hope that comes through. You can see it at the top there. I'm holding the bottom level. There's quite a bit of detail. Now Stuart said he definitely wanted these OZ style wheels, regardless of how much of those vents around the outside we lose. So we're just going to have to pop this wheel onto this axle nice and tight, or the Scalextric's axle probably, with a little bit of glue so it holds it nice and tight. And then we're just going to skim off what we need until the outside diameter goes in to the middle of this wheel, the staff's wheel. And then what we're going to do is trim off this whole wheel, what's left of this wheel on the back, so that we end up with a slightly shorter rear stub in there, this one here. And that rear stub will be our depth control for hitting that inner detail, or the nut in fact, on the inside of this staff's wheel. So then what we'll do is we'll over drill this hole here to maybe 2.5 mil, so that the new axle, the Ninko axle, easily slides in and out this wheel. So this wheel is not affecting the fit of this axle at all, because we've got plenty of material on the back of this wheel for a really good fit. We don't need more. So let's get all this sorted out and hit the lathe, and then we can go to the next stage. Just before we go to the next stage, I had this pen and paper out ready to show you what a D-bit looks like from the end of the axle. So if this is your axle, all we're going to do is we're going to grind off a flat here, and we're going to take away this piece of metal here, so we end up with two cutting edges effectively, and that's all a D-bit is, which is why it's called a D, because when you look at it from that section there, it looks like a D. And that's it. So let's get on the lathe and start the work. Okay, so while those wheels are drying, I think I'll change the motor. Now, if you know how to change your motor and how to trim the shaft, you can move on, but there are some people out there that don't know how to do it, so we're going to do it now. So first thing you notice, I've got a bit of extra shaft on the back of my motor that I don't want. Now, this car is going to have a lot of lead in it because I've got the opportunity to do that because the body's so light. So I want this shaft gone because I may well want to put a bit of lead in the front, and that shaft could be in the way. So I'll chop it off. It doesn't necessarily need to be chopped off if you're not going to put lead there potentially, so you could leave it there, but I need it gone. So this is how I actually chop the axles off my motors if they're too long. So chop it off with the Dremel first. Like that. Once it's actually off, what I like to do is put a battery. It's going to be tricky now with just doing it with two hands. So put it in a battery and make it run like that. And then bevel the sides and the front face whilst the motor's turning with your angle grind, with your Dremel. And by doing it whilst the motor is turning, you get a really smooth, perfect end of the motor shaft. So once you've done that, you need to put your gear on, or your pinion. So if you just pop him in like that, and then put him into your motor press, or your pinion press, I guess, and just gently wind down on the end of the motor shaft here until you get the correct spacing for your pinion. Now you've got to be careful with these tools, because when you get down to the bottom of the shaft, you can start pressing against the shaft and not actually pushing the pinion on. So you've got the pinion coming through here, and there's a hole in that tool just in there, and you want to line it up. You want to line the motor up with that hole so that you're not actually forcing the motor against itself, and you actually force that shaft down into the tool. It can take a little bit of going, but it can be done. Right, there we are. So we're in. So that's the actual pinion on the motor. Then you want to obviously remove the old motor and then offer in your new one, and just see if you need to go a little bit deeper with your pinion. And there we are. So I've gone a little tiny bit too far with that pinion. So what you can do is you use the other side of the tool in here, and you can pull that pinion back to where you want it. So put him in there and take an eyeball note of where it is the shaft is now, and just push him back in a little bit, and then offer your motor back into your chassis to see where you're at. And there we are. And I would say that is about spot on. So that's it, the motor's done. Okay, time to fit the front guide. Now I can show you how to use my reaming tool that I sell, and also the piece of tube that comes with it. Now this piece of tube is 4mm in diameter with a 3.5mm inner hole. And all we do is we take the existing hole that's in your chassis and you drill it out to 4mm. You want a relatively sloppy 4mm, or potentially 4.1. It just depends on how your hole drills out. So that is a 4mm drill. And we just try the tube, and we're looking for a relatively loose fit. So that's actually quite tight. So I'm going to go up to a 4.1mm drill and try that. Hopefully that will be reasonably loose. So there we are. So that's that. I'm not going to go all the way in. So pull it out and then try the tube. The tube, actually that tube is still a little bit too tight. So we've got two options. We can either go in with another 4.1 here and wiggle it around and try and generate a little bit of slack, or we can try a 4.2. So that is, there we are. Right, so that's fine. So a wiggle around with a 4.1mm drill will do the job. So that's what you want, nice and loose with the drill. And then make sure that the tube is free. Now what you want to do is just scuff up, don't have to go mad, just scuff up the end of the tube so it's a little bit rough, so the glue has got something to grip to. And then with ordinary super glue, put a little bit of super glue on the tube. You don't need much. And then pop your tube into the car with its super glue, so that the top, I've gone a little bit too deep there, but never mind. So really you want to get the tube kind of level with the actual slot car chassis, otherwise it's a bit of a waste of tube, but we are where we are with it. Right, so once that's dry, and I'm going to use super glue activator because I need to get this job done. Just put a spot on there and a spot on there. Right, so that will kick that off now. All you do then is you just trim off the tube flush with the chassis with a scalpel. So just go in there and trim off the tube like that. And while we're here, we'll just trim off that other side as well. And there you go, just like that. Now what you want to do is just try the Slotting Plus guide. And obviously it's going to be far too tight, and that's that. So if we get our Reamer tool, we can just go in. Now it's going to resist you a little bit at first, because you're starting off with the largest, smallest diameter hole possible. So you want to go in a few turns and then come out and clear out the gullet of the plastic that's developed in the hole there, and have another go, and keep on doing this until you get the reamer all the way through. And there we are. The reamer is now flush with the top of that hole. So this is a good time now to test your guide there. So the guide goes in now nice and easily about halfway. So this is the time now where we actually start to size the hole. So you want to go carefully from this point. Just go in a few more turns. And then try. And there we go, done. Simple as that. And that gives you a really nice firm guide, and is 100% seated and bedded, ready to go. Right, so that's the guide in. All we now need to do is wire it up. There we are, that's all the wiring in. The rear light board is all glued in, wired to the motor, positive and negative wires off the motor, fly lead for the front lights, and the front guide is all in and self-centering. We'll need to come back to the front guide to set it up on the car, but that's for another process. So if we plug in the front headlights and apply power to the chassis, we've got front lights and we've got rear lights. And obviously the car runs. So that's that. So now we need to get on with fitting the wheels. So time to move on to the wheels and tyres. I guess you're wondering how they turned out. I think they turned out really well. Very happy with those. So that's the rear wheels, and here are the fronts. Now I've left the Ninko tyres on the fronts because they don't offer a lot of grip, and we certainly don't want any front grip. So they'll be great for the front end. So the way I'm actually going to fit these tyres onto these wheels is I'm going to mount them onto this dummy axle, this dummy short Scalextric axle, and then I'm going to put some Sally Hansen's hard as nails nail varnish onto the rim, as recommended by Home Racing World. It's great stuff. I've been using this for a while now. I thoroughly endorse it as well. So the reason why I put these wheels onto a dummy axle is because it makes it much easier to apply the tyre. So we just want to put a little bit of varnish onto the rim like that, and then you can get your tyre and you can stretch it in one quick motion straight over the wheel. And then if we can do the same to the other side like this, don't need too much, don't need to go too mad with it, just over the wheel like that, and again get the tyre and one big quick motion, get it over. Now the reason why we put it on a dummy axle is because we can now do that and just roll the wheel and tyre combination on a flat surface, and it just evens out all of that varnish. And that's it for those. So now we've got to leave those to dry now, and then we can put them in the tyre truer and then get them on the car. Okay, so that's the wheels and tyres all done, and the guide all fitted and centering correctly with a 1.5mm spacer underneath. So if we put it on the setup plate and move the back tyres, the front tyres move exactly as they should, but they're also very free to turn like that, which is perfect. So the big question is, how light have we managed to get this body relative to the whole car? Because all the weight that we've saved at the body, we can now stick on the chassis. Now my rally cars are about 78 to 82 grams in total weight. So anything below 82 grams for this car is extra weight we can add to the chassis. And I intend to take away these 3 bits of plastic down here to make this area here completely smooth, and then make a complete horseshoe of lead right across the floor to give a really good spread of lead and get it as heavy as we can, as down low as possible. So the big question is, what does it weigh? So this is actually the body float screw that I will be using in the front of the car. It's got a really nice clean shank here. They're made by NSR and they're very, very nice. So if anybody's interested, that's 0.27 of a gram. So how much does the total car weigh? The total car weighs 59.66 grams. So basically 60 grams, which means this car is approximately 17 grams underweight, which means that we can now get a lovely great big lump of lead in the bottom of this car, and that will hopefully give us a really, really low centre of gravity. Doesn't mean I'm going to have to remove my Swift 16 sticker. Sorry Stuart, but I do have a spare one for you and a few more besides. So right, let's crack on. Let's make a lead template for this chassis, get it in and then weigh it, and then see what we've got then. Okay, so that's the lead all cut and fitted, covering as much flattered area as I can to really spread the weight out. Now our target weight was somewhere between 78 and 82 grams. So where are we now? We're at 80.9 exactly. So that's right on the money. So I'm happy to use that as a starting point, and we'll see how that runs. Okay, so all we've got to do now is put the body on, put the body float screw on, get the body float set up with that screw in this front hole, and then we can go and hit the track. So all I've done to mount the front headlights is I've hot glued to the front LED PCB to the front light cluster, and then I wrapped it in aluminium foil tape, and I put a bit of foil tape on the bonnet as well. And because the rear cluster is on the chassis but the front headlights are on the body, I put this little micro plug in to make it convenient to separate the chassis from the body. There we are. That's how I turned my subscribers' very normal ordinary Scalextric's toy car into a racing car. So I guess you're all wondering how it went round Crow Valley, and I'm sure Stuart is as well. Well, say it with me. 55 seconds is a good time, 50 seconds is very, very good, and anything quicker than 50 seconds is where you want to be for a full-blown race car. So, how did she do after all the work? She did this. And there we are, not too bad. Now, to be honest with you, I was hoping for a car that was a little bit quicker, and I was hoping to get that time a little bit quicker as well, because I took probably an hour and a half of going round and round and round to try and get that time. And I was being held back by one major problem with this car, and that's that it tramps. Under real heavy load, it just starts to hop on the back end a bit, and you've got to kind of drive through it. And I did find that the standard bearings that this car had were very loose, or not very loose, but loose enough to matter. So I ended up making a set of bearings on the lathe where the tolerances were an awful lot tighter, and that did help. I also added in an extra 3 grams into the little magnet pocket underneath the car. That's actually lead, so it's brought the weight up to 84 grams total. It still handles really well, but it just kept that back end in check that little bit more. 84 grams is still absolutely fine for a rally car, and there's nothing out of the ordinary. So what would I do with this car if I had another round of working on it? Well, I think I would definitely try and put a pod in it, that's for sure. And I'd also try and get some suspension as well. And I'd also like to get the chassis a lot further down, because the ground clearance at the moment is about 2.5 mil. And also the chassis kind of bows up as well a little bit. So that kind of adds to the ground clearance. It does and it doesn't, but it's not good. So what I'd really like to do on my car that Stuart gave me is do this work all over again, but put a pod in it, put some suspension in it, and try and lower the whole thing right the way down as well. And I think with those 3 extra parts, it would make the car much quicker and much more reliable to get a fast lap. So I've really enjoyed working on this car, and thank you very much for Stuart for giving it to me to work on, and also for giving me the other Ford Escort that I can work on myself at a later date quietly in the background. So I hope you've really enjoyed this content as well, and I hope you've taken something from it and you could apply something of what I've done to your own cars. And remember, if any of these tools that I've used in this video are of any use to you, the links are below. So if you've enjoyed this content, maybe you'll subscribe, and if you could hit the little bell button, that would be awesome. So until the next time, thank you very much.